Welcome, YouTubers. This is the maybe the wrap-up session. I assume it's going to be the wrap-up session. I'm pretty much done with 2017 NBA results. Very poor results. Well, good mixed results, I'll say. Right? Didn't feel good about this season. I'm going to put it on course. It's not as bad as the 2014 NFL, but definitely not a happy camper. I've been really busy. And so that's why I haven't kept up with some of this graph. I was doing quite well. But anyways, this is my chart. And it's familiar. NBA chart, MLB chart are kind of look like this. And broken into 6 sessions. I'm not completed with the 6th session yet. I think there's only a handful of games left in the regular season. But I'll be done with the NBA. I may bet a few of those games. But most of my money's frozen right here. It made a pretty good percentage. But it was a hell of a ride, and my A group crashed and burned. So that's what I'm a little depressed about. But again, my charts mostly, just as a reminder here, they kind of very understate real-world performance. So my real-world performance is generally better than what you see out here, and I do that on purpose just because I don't want to come with a chart that's larger than you're going to get in real life. It's just not very honest per se. So let me explain those real world differences pretty quickly just for purposes of historical, in case you haven't seen those before. There's 3 basic components to that. The first one is that it's actually this graph overstates in this regard in that all my bets, I do minus 110 odds, and I use covers numbers. In the real world, you'll have a few bets that are like minus 115 and minus 20. You may have some bets that offset that a little bit with like a minus 105 or an even bet for the payouts. But generally speaking, especially if you're on like a Bovada or something who's historically got a little bit lower rates in terms of payouts or in terms of lines, then you'll typically have a little more on the lower side than the higher side. So your line would be slightly 1 to 2% is what I found in the past, depending on the number of bets and where you're at. So this line would actually overstate in that regards, which is the opposite of what I was talking about. But there's 2 other factors. The second factor is that, lines can change and differ. And for whatever reason, lines change during a day. Lines change, even covers has weird numbers sometimes on their lines that aren't realistic to the real world, but I tend to bet my lines earlier. Like for the NBA, it's 8 in the morning, usually by noon. I certainly have those bets in, and then I'm comparing some game time lines, and for whatever reason, I tend to find that those earlier bets, those shark type bets, right, that they call earlier in the day, seem to do better on average. Yeah, you win some, you lose some, but that generally I get a better percentage out of it than this line shows. Now, again, that's not a whole lot. I call those kind of conflicts where those earlier numbers, what I got in the real world, doesn't match covers. Sometimes cover goes way off the board. Like we had just one a couple days ago that, for all intents and purposes, the noon betting was like Toronto was +1, so they were a dog. And then even in the late afternoon, they switched to a -1.5 favorite. You could get that relatively easily, and lo and behold, I'm checking the scores at like 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, wow, covers has them Toronto -3, a 3-point favorite, and that's a big 4-point or a 1.5 swing. And I said, wow, that's, most of the people didn't bet at that. Most of the people that bet at Toronto +1 or -1.5. Now that doesn't make a difference if Toronto, wins by 10, or if they lose by 5. I mean, that happens frequently, but it doesn't matter, right? If you're not betting that game or it's not part of my contest. But in this case, Toronto won that game by 3. So it's a push in the covers world, and so it'll be a push on this chart. But in reality, most people in the world won that bet. So that's where you get a couple of those. Occasionally the covers is way out of bounds in a different regards. And I picked this chart off the past results page of covers, and I do my day-to-day on the scoreboard, and occasionally there'll be a half a point difference, and that showed up this year too in a game that mattered. And so sometimes if it's a push on this chart and you actually won, you're actually $1,800, yeah, $1,800 $818 because the vig comes out of the, if you lose a bet, you're losing 2,000 when I'm betting here, and if you win, your net is plus 1818, and the $182 goes to the vig, right, when you win. So if it's a win versus a push, you're talking about an $1,800 difference. If it's a win versus a loss, you're talking about the 1,800 plus to 2,000, right? So it's a $3,800 difference. That's a big difference on this chart and this line and the amount of money I play. And push versus a loss is just a 2,000, right? So if you got a push and it was reported a loss, so occasionally that reverts the other way, but it always seems like I'm always higher than this line, and that might make there's not a whole lot of conflicts, but that might make one or two conflicts to bump you up like $1,800 above what I'm talking about here, and that's another 10%. $2,000 is a 10% of what I'm betting on my bankroll of a $2,000 bankroll with a $20,000 bankroll with a $2,000 bet. So very aggressive betting scheme. That's the second way. Now those are very small numbers, although the second one I was talking about is a little bit higher. But the biggest is the number 3, which I go through and because there's so many games in the NBA and the MLB, I kind of do it off those past results, and I do it by team, and I have my algorithm to say, okay, I'm all based around teams getting in a little bit of a slump, the public moving a certain way, creating some value. And they're actually better than what the number is, and I hope they come in, right? So it's really team by team by team, and I'm going through it. So I may have a game, and quite a few games actually, where a Boston's playing a Cleveland, and by my numbers, I'm looking at Boston, and they're a go, right? They're somebody that I want to bet, and then I'm looking at Cleveland independently, and they're also a go. And so those two clash, and I call that a head-to-head, contest, where by the numbers and on this chart, I'll bet both sides, and so I'm pretty much guaranteed to lose the vig. In that particular case, $182 vig gets lost for every contest that happens, and it's dependent on whether I'm frozen and I'm playing too. I calculate both numbers, but if I'm frozen, then I'm not playing that game, and it doesn't matter. But if I'm active and you got a head-to-head, it'll show up as a minus 182 loss on this chart, $182 loss. When in reality, when I'm doing the daily schedule, I hammer those conflicts out. I don't bet that game. You just don't bet. It's no sense betting that game when you're just going to lose. If you bet both sides, you'll you spend $4,000 and you'll get back $3,818 in return because one side will win. So maybe there's an odd chance somebody will push, but come on, those numbers were quite significant this year for the A side because when I get into that A performance system, I was almost never frozen. I froze some portions of the first 2 sessions. After that, I haven't been frozen. So especially late I'm heavy in the late bettings in the 5th and the 6th session, end of year, just like I am in all my methodologies. So the number for the A bet system is I'm up to 38 games already, and we got quite a few games left in the season. I'm on the 6th of April, and so I'm already at almost $7,000. 69.16 is what the difference between that blue line, that dark blue line, and where I am in the real world, just based upon those $182 VIGs. So not going to make the difference because bust out is bust out, but it's not as bad as it looks. But my B side, which is my core, my normal betting, that's only got 3 so far, and that's going to scale up a little bit here. That's only through 5 sessions, by the way, those numbers. I got to go figure out the 6. But that'll be a little bit, so that's $546 ahead of where I am, so, whatever, 10%, 5% or something. So not a whole lot, but you will win more than what's on these charts, typically, for a normal year. So basically, as I get into this again, my A picks are, my B picks are my core. That's my solid. That's what I bet. Those are my solid picks that they basically come from the A losers. So if it's a much smaller subset, only anybody who wins my A system doesn't get to the B system. Anybody who loses does bet in my B system. So the numbers are going to be a lot larger in the A system than the B system in terms of number of picks. But my B system's my solid core. I'm usually 60 to 65%. Results, as far as a win percentage, we're talking about straight ATS. There's no money lines. There's no over-unders here. It's all ATS. Solid stuff. So 60, 65% pretty good, pretty much in my wheelhouse in that system. And it's also with the limited number of bets. That's where that 10% aggressive betting system. So that's why I'm betting the 2,000 into 20,000. But a lot of clients as a handicapper, they want, they just want picks. They want more and more picks. Picks. And it's like, well, the more you pick, the more likely you are to lose. But I've given out the A system in the past. It also helps as a precursor in case I have a website problem or whatever. You can say, anybody who lost, the last guy, if you lose, all the losers on the A system on one night are going to show up the next game in the B system. So you almost don't need to follow my picks. You just need to follow what's coming up, and you can bet them anytime you want, especially if you see a real good number. But that's your opinion. It all washes out in the end. But so the A is much more risky. There's much more picks. Picking the 10% has a much greater percent of going bust. I mean, any system can go bust, right? I mean, even a 1% bettor can go bust. They probably, matter of fact, most of them do long term if they're not any good. It doesn't matter what you bet, but when you're betting 10% of your bankroll, you can certainly go bust pretty quick. And you're going to see that in this graph coming up. So it's almost like a lessons learned graph. But again, the clients that and they don't stay my clients very long anyways, because I just don't, even on the A system, I just don't make enough picks. I mean, I'm out through 100 picks, right? 110 picks, it looks like, through 5 sessions. I'm 51 and 59 versus my B system that's got 27 picks. So it's 4 times the picks, but believe me, people want 20 picks a day. They got $20,000. They want to put 1,000, or they want to put 100 a game for their 20 games. They take 50 games. I just don't have time to make, and you really can't make good. The good part is my A system usually makes money for these clowns that like to bet. I'm sure they bet other people's systems, or they just lose money otherwise betting crazy people. But I love those people, not as clients, because that's who we win money from. That's those people that lose atrociously are the ones we win money from. And if they followed my A system, I just like to think that they would have donated that money anyways. They would have donated their bankroll anyways. And this year they actually donated it versus winning. So I don't have a lot of sympathy, but at the same time, I'm very, very upset that my A picks went to crap and my B picks struggled so badly overall. So let's get into it. I know I speak a lot there and I'll talk a lot, but hey, it's my podcast here, my YouTube video, and if you're with me, you're with me. If you're not, you're not. So let's do the A picks, and that's the bright blue line. And I bet a little bit early, a couple games, but they kind of netted out. So the first day on my A picks, I'm looking for 10% a session, which would get me from 20,000 to 22,000 in this first session. And I won a couple games, so I'm up 18 times 2 is 36-ish. So that just puts you, actually I was 3-1, including the win-loss early, sort of just before the pre-session, right, this year. So I was 2-0 that first day, and I was 18 minus that first vig. It's a little bit less, and I froze out. And so what you see in these blue dots are how my picks went after the freeze. So I actually wasn't playing. I wasn't recommended playing those games. You can see they took a tumble. But I was still up here at just under 20%. So second session resets itself, and I went down and up, down and up, down and up, and eventually I just needed like one pick to get over 20%, which is where I wanted to be. So I got that pick finally. I went 6-3 at that point, 66% that is. And that was, again, same type of thing, just bad juju, went down and up, down and up. Eventually it got to not too bad of a loss if you picked every pick right that I was doing. I usually don't recommend doing that, but if you want a lot of action, that's even more action than what the numbers are here. The 6 and the 9 picks, right? You'd have a lot more if you were making all these other picks. So maybe you're an action junkie, but you're always going to lose your money. So the third, I was definitely looking for 30% in the third, and I went on just a tumbleweed here. You can see this line right here just going down, down, down. It plateaued. This plateau is actually not, that's actually the All-Star break, so there were no games that week. And then I plateaued and plunged even more. So just terrible. I went from, over 24,000 down to 12,000, so I almost lost like $12,000. Should have froze out probably earlier, maybe at the All-Star break. But I don't care about the apex a whole lot. Now, the good part is there's no good parts to this. But the fourth session, again, I'm trying to hit 30 or 40%. And so I'm going to let it ride. And it grew pretty big, certainly made much more than the 10% in that session. It was up 30% at one point. So if you'd started that session, it was real good for you. But if you were playing all along, big loser. But then look at this tumbleweed. So again, I'm going from 18,000 down to below 2,000, and that's where I don't bet a lot of money in this system. Just gotta play it just for fun, $100 a bet or something. And I lost my couple grand there. That's pretty much that's when this is the end of my playing right here. When it hit below 2,000, I said, Jesus, I have a feeling it'll come back, but I'm just done. Right, I'm done. Now it did come back, but again, you can't really fully fund without diving in your pocket when you're at the low point here. So it did come back to 8,000, and then it went back down to just over 2,000. So in that session, it did go from 12, and you lost another 10,000 from 12,000 to 2,000 that session. Then it goes off the chart, right? So the fifth session comes out, it goes off the chart. It kept on tumbling, just crazy. Now you can see it finished way down. Again, I'm not even putting it on the chart because it's laughable. I'm not freezing out any of this, so you're getting a lot of these duplicate games in here too that were hurting things. But then you saw it actually pop back on the chart here, and it came up. We're in the sixth session, then it went down off the chart, and now it's it's spiking back up. It came back up pretty strongly, and I'm here now, and we'll just see where it goes for the rest of the session. Maybe I'll add a quick blurb at the end to say where we got finally. But if there's a silver lining in this, I was 20 games head-to-head before at the end of the fifth. I know I'm another 15 already in the sixth session. So this number here reflects a $7,000 big loss, reflects to where we are sort of to date. And that's still going up every day because there's a lot of head-to-heads when you're playing a lot of games and a lot of losers. So I don't know, what 6,000 plus 7,000 is 13,000. So I'm actually here. Still pretty strong loser, and like I said, I gave up a long time ago. So yeah, just atrocious. 51 and 59, and we'll see. This is actually number's going to get a little bit better, but when you're losing by 8 games under 500, forget it. Your money's gone. So yeah, just reset, reuse your bankroll. Hopefully you won other sessions, or you got some in reserve, or start over, or do what you got to do. It sucks. Absolutely sucks. I hate it, but again, I don't recommend that system too highly. So let's go into the black line, which is my B system, second picks, whatever you want to call it. And that one started on the day one here out in January, and was just below. We won. It was just below the 10%, so I let it ride, and then it went down, and it came back, and eventually I popped over that 10%, so I was 4-2 in the first session when I froze out. Now after the freeze, you can see the next 3 days we went down. So I was fortunate to get out at a high point, just like I was on the blue system, getting out at the high points here. Second session starts, I won right away, so now I'm 5-2, right? And I'm up 20-something%, and froze out. Now the blacks kind of went back. They didn't lose too much or gain too much after that, so if you played, but they never got above what I was. So again, I was fortunate to get out at the high point, just like I was on the blue system. And so the third system starts. Not uncommon to go down, a couple bets or something, and then come back like I did here. Go up, go down. But I never made it back. I never made it to 30% in the end of the third session. And the A's were tanking, and I had tanked previously, so I was getting a little nervous, right? And so started the fourth session, got a couple wins right off the bat, and I got 39%, which to me was close enough to 40, and I didn't feel real confident. So I froze it out there on the first day and kind of had a stagnant fourth session. But the numbers after that went down and up, down and up. It did peak up over 40%. That's where you got the green dot here. And then it plunged. So you could have got up out of 40%, but, I got out at 39. That was good enough for me. 11-6 at that point. And so I was looking in the fifth session to go to 50%. I even joked. I said, hey, if I make 50%, I might quit for the session, for the year. Forget the rest of this, but you got a real decision to make if you start plunging. Well, lo and behold, I start plunging, and I really start plunging, and I was thinking about getting out right there when I almost was a zero. I waited till it crossed the zero, and I said, all right, that's enough of that. And it's a good thing. I fully expected to actually pop back and have some regret, but oh my God, did that thing continue to plunge. You see it plunged all the way down to 2,000. So I went from 28,000 to 2,000. I mean, that's a 26,000, 13 game net losing, not a losing streak, but 13 net units lost. That's going to kill your bankroll if you had followed that. So yeah, definitely tough if you didn't get out at a certain point here. You have to get out. You have to pull the parachute and just hope for the best, which is what I did at that point. So I was net negative ROI through 5 sessions. So that wasn't making me happy. Along with the blues crapping out in the 4th session, I was like, this is a disaster. But right away, I was going to let it roll. I wasn't going to look for 10% in the 6th session. I was going to let it roll, try to get to 50%, because I felt good about that number at the end of the 4th session. And it came up. It came on strong. Good for me. Came on strong. Came down again. So I was like, oh, man, I was just below 50. Here we go again. But it popped up. All right, so I got 52%. That is $30,540 from a $20,000 starting bankroll, so up $10,000. Happy with that. It's gone up a little bit since then, but so if you keep playing it, you're right. I will see where it goes. It might continue to go up. I've had years where it spiked up to 90%, right, or 100, or up above that. That's why this chart goes up to 55,000 or 50,000. I've had one year where it ended up there, real strong. We'll see where this blue goes. See if this blue goes strong, but. Yeah, I'm out at 52%. So that's what it is for the year. For me, there's only a few games left, so I don't think this chart's going to go all the way. I think there's 4 games. I think it goes out to 12th or something like that. I don't play the playoffs. I'm done with that. I'll go on to baseball. Baseball's already started, and I got to get prepped up for that. Same type of regular season, very much like this chart. So, yeah, 50%. I consider myself very lucky to get out there, particularly at this particular point. But at some point, you got to cut your losses. If you cut it earlier, you'd probably stop at 60%. The same type of thing. A pretty drastic curve, so a lot of variability. But that's where I am today, and I may not publish the rest of this chart. I might just put a little text in there. I might add on this. I don't know if I'm going to publish this video now or wait another week. I'm just really busy, and like I said, I got the baseball to go study up on. I don't actually even know when I start yet. I don't start usually after the 10th or 11th game, but I think we're already 3 or 4 games in on baseball, so I got to get that all prepped up and see what Covers has done for their software. See if I got to make an adaptation on my algorithms and where I'm at. But I finished strong on that sport too, so I expect that head-to-head to clash up if you happen to be non-frozen on these particular items. Again, my B side, even though I've got 3 that I counted for the B side, there's a 10 or 15 total that I've gone head-to-head. I've just been frozen when they happen, so if you played every game, you'd actually be ahead, but those lines are nowhere in sight, so yeah, just terrible picking. Chalk it up to a loser, but I feel bad about it. But hopefully you made some money, or you stuck in on one of these sessions and you made some money. Otherwise, just reload. We'll go forward. We will survive. All right. Thank you very much.